me start recording.
It is not clear.
It
is not, voice is not clear. Rahman Hafiz, my voice is not clear to me. Your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Abhi little bit stable. Little bit stable. Radha की आवाज ठीक था ये.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am your panel coordinator, Ahmad Hafiz, from Institute of English Studies, Punjab University. A huge welcome to all for Session 2, Panel 2B, that spotlights Kashmir, Palestine, violence, conflict, and resolution. Thank you all, everyone, for joining the panel. Our honorable chair for this panel is Dr. EJAZ, who is Assistant Professor at Pakistan Studies Center, University of the Punjab. Thank you all for joining. I will now share the house rules and will then hand over the microphone to the panel chair. So the house rules are: attendees must keep their cameras off and microphones mute throughout the session. Presenters may keep their cameras on throughout the panel. All questions should be sent in the meeting chat box and will be entertained in the end. The questions will be read by the panel chair. The presenters shall use Present Now option from the Google Meet bar when within the panel to display their PowerPoint slides. The coordinator will ensure time management by sending a reminder in the chat box. The chair shall take over to affirm the time management. I would now request the panel chair to please carry the session forward. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Hello. I start now about the Kashmir-Palestine violence, conflict, and resolution. The time to act on Palestine and Kashmir is now, and tangible actions need to be taken immediately by the United Nations, whose credibility is at stake. Expectations are massive. Our coming generation's future at stake, and everyone needs to shape it. Let's expect this universe and this entire world through peaceful means. Palestinians are humans. They are humans, and everyone in this world, and they should be treated like that. And if the world is still silent, as it is, so world means ignorant, trust me, we will have to pay a very heavy price, and none of us will be able to justify it. So let's go to sessions. Starting our today's session is regarding this hot issues of world. So in this session we have 5 panelists. First of all, I would like to invite Mahjoor Jia Radha. She's from Government First Grade College, Pedadi, India.
From Karnataka, India, sir. It's affiliated to Bangalore University.
Okay. Bangalore University. Because I have
Yes.
Government First Grade College. That's why I am mentioning. She is from Bangalore University.
Yes.
Okay, Government First Grade College, Bangalore University. Okay, that's part of. Okay. So I invite you, ma'am, to speak over the narrate conflicts and Kashmiri women lost in terror by Naima. So topic is narrative conflicts and Kashmiri women. Please, ma'am, Radha, ma'am, please just.
Coordinator and the presenters. Today, will you please share my PPTs?
Ma'am, you can share your slides via the button below in the Google Meet bar. Presenters have to share their slides.
Can I share mine?
Yes, ma'am.
Radha, ma'am.
Because we haven't received your slides.
Okay, fine. Yeah. See, I'm going to present today. Good evening, all.
Yeah.
So my area of study is narrative conflicts, South Asian women writers. Here it's an effort to analyze in this presentation the narrative of an employed woman as a reformer caught in the web of cause and effect of war and in the crux of gender inequality. In the presentation, I have made an attempt to analyze by applying the narrative theoretical approach of Jerome Bruner and Michael Bloomberg's narrative analysis and integrative approach. So to come, what is a narrative? According to Paul Kinghorn, people without narratives do not exist. The narrative becomes an expression of oneself and others. To Vygotsky, human learning and development occur in socially, culturally shaped contexts. To make social interactions meaningful, one revisits past experiences and makes an effort to connect to the present. For the narratives, try to comprehend the changes in historical and social conditions. Narrative research is thus the study of how human beings experience the world in reality. Coming to the process of narrative inquiry, that is, how is that I'm going to investigate the narrative in my narratives or in my research. According to Jerome Bruner, NS, the narrative construction of reality addresses narratives as social realities and the real-world narratives to be analyzed as representing and constructing confused human participation in the changed world or the transit world. Narrative supposes a social norm. He believes that narratives deal with particular events, although some events may be left vague, he says. So Michael Bamberg responds to this. He says, it is this vague that we have to stress. And so I quote Bamberg, this blurring seemed to have been the hope that narrative methods were a ticket to an authentic identity people and organizations are said to have and live. He says to reorient narrative analyzing approach, and also recommends to take off from the actual self to look into the actual interactions from everyday work. He says that narratives are more than narratives, that is, narratives within which people make sense about others and themselves. Self-thought to thought in everyday interaction. This is what he means when he says have, said to have and live. Coming to his positioning identities, he says the positioning identities happens in three ways. According to him, self and others, agency versus passivity, constancy and change. How is that we have to look this into in a narrative? He says, we are the same in the same social context, but with particular interaction, we differ with the other. So it may be in any form. It may be ethnicity, it may be gender, or whatever it may be. He says these differences may vary according to the situations. It may not be the same everywhere. But he says the purpose of relevance indifference has to become important. Second, when he comes to agency versus passivity, is the circumstance like social, historical, and geopolitical conditions that make a person or an individual. Like a person or an individual, the way we perceive the world, we become. The way we get involved becomes very important as participants in social changes there the agency plays. Constancy and change. It's like I am not the same that I was yesterday. Like identity and sense of self navigate in every story. Grounding to him becomes very important. It's where the identities position and reposition. Coming to the book, Naima Major's Lost in Terror, is the first. Naima Major becomes the first woman writer to voice Kashmiri women. It's the first person narrative, nameless throughout, represents the whole Kashmiri women. The events unfold are real. She revisits the late 1980s and early 1990s Kashmir and its assault in the society. So it is also been considered as an resistant literature of Kashmir written through the perspective of a woman. So in the book, she has recollected, or she recollects many events, but I wish to discuss here 3 events that narrates on the complexities of understanding history, the influence of political imbalance within the family or political violence, or gender-based violence, volatile political violence. So coming to my first event, complexity in understanding history. She says in her book, history becomes a complicated and confusing subject. Her father would come with a different version of history that never related to the classroom teaching history. Says her father, the narrator's father had defied his community cultural norms by sending his daughters to schooling that was considered ill. Educated girls would bring ill to the family, but had failed to renegotiate the history, though he was bitter against the leaders whom he had praised and supported for a greater change, had betrayed. He had failed to give a proper response to her daughter for years. It was for Azadi. It's something like what made the narrator discursive of knowing or unknowing history. Was she repenting for trusting the so-called freedom fighters, and at the same time people of Kashmir deceiving themselves for being innocent? Kashmirs are philosophical by nature. They have a long history of Sufi tradition, respected each other's cultures and rituals. Maybe she is questioning the sensibility of spirituality. Did she feel insecure or feel guilty of being part of Azadi internally without understanding the true meaning of the word freedom? By doing so, was she blaming elders for making the young generation futureless, sufferers, wayward adults, and so on? In other words, she may be trying to question their fight for the idea of nation and individual self-determination, knowing that Kashmir was ever tagged with a history of no proper political representation. I want to quote here Sumatra Bose in Kashmiri Roots of Conflict, Paths to Peace, in his introduction, initiates with the insightful words of Honorable Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, in a search for lasting solution to the Kashmir problem, both in its external and internal dimensions. We shall not traverse solely on the beaten track of the past. Mindsets will have to be altered and historical baggage jettisoned. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, January 2002, Prime Minister of India. So second, coming to influence of volatile politics in relationships. Here, she talks about the relationship between her husband and herself. She says, the narrator appropriates, the author and the narrator appropriates the words honor and shame for the differential treatment meted for the daughter-in-law and the daughters in the family. Daughter-in-law, she is married to a very conventional Muslim family. The daughters are not allowed to go outside, means they are confined within 4 walls. Whereas the daughter-in-law, who is an employee in Radio Kashmir, has been accepted into the family. This I am trying to say here, this is the kitchen expenses. She says, kitchen expenses have to be done without resisting to cook for the shelter militants by Azad, her husband. Resisting would result in more harsh, imposing and abusive language that was, as she puts, became too much to endure. On the contrary, when his brother gets arrested for his proximity with a wanted militant, with all the theatrical gestures, finally orders her to get rid of his brother from the clutches of the soldiers by communicating with the officer, once her classmate. Recalling Spivak's Can the Subaltern Speak? The narrator, who could look after herself, was bound to the society. but didn't mean to surrender herself. She is not a woman as Mina Modar's treats. Islam is an ideology separate from and outside social relations and practices. It becomes an unintellectual understanding of a woman in the conflict-ridden states of or countries in doing so. Through her day-to-day interactions, positioned herself against the other, the patriarchy, maybe as a woman improving the abilities of the Kashmiri women, contesting the norms of socio-political upheavals both externally and internally. The subaltern, who is not doubly but thrice marginalized, that is as a wife, as an employee and working woman, well represents the role of positioning identity, proving women are thought provokers towards reconciliation. Subaltern can voice through her narratives for the broader community progress and thus becomes a reformer. So coming to my last gender based violence, Azad, her husband, she narrates in the book, was whispering and laughing at the mutilated dead body of Shayasta, an artist and radio artist, while showing it to a villager from a newspaper. Recalls the words of her only friend and colleague who leaves Kashmir. This becomes very important, without informing her after that incident. Narrator recollects Tahira shouting on the incident. Looking at the mutilated body of the Shayasta, she shouts, "The freedom movement was doomed on the day that an innocent girl was tortured to death." In another event, she recollects her interaction with a girl from a Shopian district who, on condition of not revealing her name, wanted to give a live telecast, was a teacher in a primary school. After she went live on the radio to broadcast her terror, shows the author the burnt marks on her neck, arms and legs, the alleged atrocities of soldiers on her. She was drugged, beaten, and sexually assaulted. To gather information about the boys playing the cricket field adjacent to her school. Her only protection was the burqa from 3 years after her mother's death. The teacher questions the author. "Can you guarantee me protection if I take my burqa?" So here, the author feels completely taken back. She tells, "My experiment in reality programs have failed miserably." Why does she tell so? Because she had come with the program and had received a good responses on burqa campaigns, where many women came forward against burqa. And so here she narrates this incident and says, "My experiment in reality programs have failed miserably." So these two sentences of the dialogues, it's something that draws attention to the fate of the marginalized community. The first statement may have provided a way out for the woman from the elite class, but it also echoes the hypocritic mindset of the society. The second statement, quite contrary to the first, challenges the powerful motives of the dominant. The narrator may be trying to admit that she had failed to understand what seemed to be the real, had much deeper connotations. It was not simple as interviewing or making like-minded people respond, but were something more abstract. Concluding, narrative conflicts are true responses of society. It gives endless possibilities to human life and its historical association. Women living in conflict have more challenging roles to adorn. Conflict tears her life into incredible possibilities of surviving. This becomes very important. In the orthodox patriarchal world, all her efforts to safeguard the family and herself go unnoticing, yet she keeps strides to make aware of the importance of her presence. Conventional norm blind their effort to make men sensible. The experiential world of the Kashmiri people and the way they are dealing with them becomes part of the author, the narrator here. Their experiential world becomes hers, and she partakes or is one of the participants among them. This makes her consider those past events as important in the present. Through visiting and revisiting, she has tried to comprehend, compare, and contrast self and others. By doing so, she keeps on changing, keeps on questioning her, than her, there, the other, role in comprehending the word freedom. The essence of her insightful narratives, as Bamberg says, needs to be fashioned, refashioned, and reworked to create a world of hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Radha. Thank you very much. It is a very vital for us, valuable thoughts you have given us. And it is very clear, I understand, all people understand, people without narratives cannot live and they are not living. So I hope that it will be hopeful for us in further in future also, and investigating further for Kashmiri's life. Your ideas and suggestions are bringing improvement to Kashmiris. I hope. I hope. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Omar Ejazi. Omar Ejazi, sir, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, so it is great pleasure for me to invite you, and you are from Brunel University, London. It is correct? Okay, thank you very much. Your topic is echo cortex of refusal crisis, epistemologies, and environmental violence in Kashmir. This is also important because it is theory of to understand the society. So we also, Omar Ajazi, we invite you to please speak over issue and this topic. Thank you very much. Please care from about time also. Care about time because we have very short space for all.
All right, thank you very much. I apologize, I don't have any slides. I'm just going to take the next 10 minutes to summarize my paper. Just a bit of context. My work is mostly set in the remote mountainscapes of the Neelam Valley, that is Pakistan-administered Kashmir, and its continuity with northern Pakistan, where, as you know, people are overwhelmingly rural and pastoral. And in this context, this is a context where I explore questions of violence and social repair, and I mostly work and think ethnographically. I think it's important to point out that the literature that does exist in Kashmir, notably very little attention has been paid to the Kashmir that's under Pakistan's jurisdiction, though I think this is slowly changing, and that's a good development. Coming back to the paper, when I use words like violence, I mean multi-sided violence, a violence that is not just historically situated, but a constant duration of oppression, diminishment, and annihilation. And for those who live in Kashmir, violence in its various forms, whether it is poverty, lack of services, isolation, military surveillance, earthquakes or floods, violence is omnipresent. It's always light-shaping, constant. So in my paper, I asked the following questions. What openings are created if environmental violence is placed at the heart of the study of Kashmir? And what might an intention to the absorption of ecological decay, ruin, and theft in the everyday reveal? And I pose these questions to illuminate the mutual absorption of the social, the environmental, and the political, and bring to the fore the full range of violence at play and possibilities of ethical life therein. The people of Neelam insist on reparative readings of the environment as a site of abundance and potentiality, as opposed to only scarcity, danger, and decline. And these assertions refuse Neelam's absorption into the state's ecobody and the metropole's somewhat extractive relationships. Indigenous scholar Kyle White, he talks about crisis epistemologies. These are colonial insistences that a certain present is experienced as new. And he argues that crisis epistemologies, structured through narratives of urgency and unprecedentedness, render colonialism defensible as a necessary response to a real or perceived crisis, dismissing all other concerns about ethics, equity, or justice. An example of this are state-led responses to environmental crisis. And while environmental crisis is undoubtedly folding in Kashmir, it does not override past and ongoing experiences of coloniality, which have already rendered the present as troubled and as dystopian. And this includes relations and technologies that are pulled into play as ecological crisis and change unfold in the long duration. So I want to take the next 7 minutes left for my talk, and I'm going to offer you, let's say, an ethnographic vignette that demonstrates some of these assertions. So this is the vignette. So the small guest house that I often stay in Neelam is frequented by a range of mid and low-ranking state officials. The visits by government officials display the kind of fear and hold of the state on its subjects. They're encapsulated within unnecessarily elaborate and belabored protocols that almost take on a theatrical resonance. One of my interlocutors who I work with closely in the field, he laughed and he says, the visits of the government officials are like a peacock's dance. They show up thinking that they're beautiful birds and that everyone is mesmerized by them. Then they walk around moodily like a peacock, while everyone holds their breath, waiting for the peacock to spread its feathers. The truth is, we're all held hostage to the waiting. We would rather prefer that they quickly go home. Kashmir is not a theater, and this is not a zoo. So, one day, special arrangements were being made in this guest house garden to receive an important state official. A faded red carpet lay spread on the grass, on which a rectangle table and a series of plastic chairs rested. A bright white cloth covered the table, which had been painstakingly washed the night before to remove any stains. Earlier in the day, a protocol officer provided silver cutlery and china to Abrar, and this is the caretaker of the guest house. Abrar takes the extra step of carefully wiping the cutlery and china down with a moist cloth to take off any excess dirt. The setting looks really grand, despite the modest circumstances. So a conservationist officer from Islamabad was set to visit Neelam that day. He was coming to investigate some complaints lodged by a group of villagers. There was a buzz in the surrounding villages that somebody important from the environmental ministry would be stopping by. No one seemed to be concerned about the details because the association with the state carried enough weight and importance. So as you might know, forests in Neelam are protected. It is illegal to cut trees without prior permission from the Forestry, Wildlife and Fisheries Department, or even catch fish from the water is similarly prohibited unless you have permission to do so. If someone does so without necessary approval, a complaint can be launched, triggering a police investigation. So the conservationist officer was there to investigate one such complaint. As I'm watching, a man dressed in crisply starched, white shalwar kameez and a black waistcoat, he darted into the guest house. The sir is here, he yelled, out of breath from a sprint. Abrar, the caretaker of the guest house, he runs inside to bring out the china and the cutlery, and I retreat to the courtyard to get out of the way. The chief conservationist makes his way to the guest house. He is flanked by several men from his office, clutching walkie-talkies and dressed identically in white shalwar kameez and similarly black waistcoats. Accompanying him were some people from the village, assumingly they're the ones who had lodged the complaint in the first place. The atmosphere is electric, and I can sense a pride in the air. His team of officials has with him their own food and tea. We wouldn't want the sir to get sick from eating the food at the guest house, one of his officers later he confides in me. Another officer, he sets a steel thermos on the table and several shiny tiffin boxes. Abrar, the caretaker, he lays out the teacups and plates. Another officer pours tea from the thermos. and uncovers the food, while the rest position themselves in various corners of the garden. So it's a spectacle of sorts, kind of a ceremony, really. And the chief conservationist and the villagers, they stay on for another hour, conversing, sipping tea, eating, chatting with one another. Other villagers passing the guest house curiously peek in to see what's happening. You can see little children gathering around the guest house. You can see men and women just kind of curiously looking in to see what is going on in this space. I'm too far from the garden to actually hear anything, but just by being in the presence of these men, I felt that important stately matters were unfolding in front of my eyes. And the performative gestures, such as the numerous protocol officers, the polished cutlery and china, the red carpet, they all are intentional components of the optics and logics of maintaining a certain hold and fear of the state on those living in its peripheries. And this official visit is just really one example of how the state reproduces itself on the margins and reminds its subjects about who calls the shots, despite the state's absence or minimal presence in many important considerations of life, such as the provision of services, education, for example. Later on, one of my interlocutors, he says, the state controls the rivers just like a forest. There are enough trees in the forest and fish in the water for everyone to use and more. It is not that collecting wood to heat or repair our homes, or fish to fill our bellies will deplete our jungles and waterways. God produces more, and after all, God is the one, he owns an entire system in place. Just in conclusion, Indigenous scholar Audra Simpson, she reminds us that the colonial present is achieved through a selective preference of one version of the present over all others. This, according to her, demonstrates the unequal power to define what matters, who matters, what paths are alive, and when they die. So for the people of Kashmir, including those in Neelam, life under environmental change cannot be disentangled from the present conditions of coloniality. Rather, the two are mutually implicated. I'm just going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar Azazi, which is very vital for us, very good, very enlightening. Your paper that it is a very clear environment in as going to worst in Kashmir, because it is full of dark and terror and death. And if you look at the social political realities of India, Pakistan, Kashmir over the last 60 years, we see dimensions of violence through critical readings, apological crisis in valley to unending cycle of violence is there. So your views are also enlightening us about the Kashmiris, and we all understand that what is a problem there. But your paper also, we are waiting for that. We will read that also. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Dr. Muhammad Riaz Mahmood, National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. Dr. Riaz, you are here?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Welcome. You are welcome. Dr. Riaz is going to talk on Kashmir. Israel-Palestine conflict. That is also very important for us. So, an analytical survey, an analytical analysis, he is going to intellectual with reference of intellectual approach of Fez, Fez. So we also like that because it is important. So I would like to Dr. Muhammad Riaz, please speak on.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Muhammad Riaz Mahmood, working as Associate Professor in the Department of Islamic Studies, National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad, Pakistan. The topic is the resolution of Israel-Palestine conflict and analysis of the intellectual approach of Faiz Ahmad Faiz. The research paper is presented to analyze the intellectual approach of renowned progressive Pakistani poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz in his search for a peaceful and workable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This article seeks to find guidelines for restoring the Palestinian people's right to self-determination in the context of Faiz's views on civilization and politics. Israel has destroyed the economy and socio-political infrastructure of Palestinians. Faiz created valuable literature for the rights and freedom of the Palestinian people. While in Beirut, Faiz witnessed firsthand the plight of the Palestinian people. His poetic capital has great influence the views of thinkers, politicians, revolutionaries, and artists on the Palestinian issue. Faiz's bold and rebellious thinking against the oppressive regime is a source of encouragement to the Palestinians. In light of his vision, Palestinians can devise a dignified strategy for achieving independence. This thought is also a message of honor and self-respect for the nations of the world. Faiz's concern can play a leading role in resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This research paper is presented in search of these guidelines from Faiz's point of view. Palestine is one of the oldest countries in the world. This is the name of the area that was between Lebanon and Egypt, most of which is now the state of Israel. Before 1948, this whole area was called Palestine. In 1947, the United Nations voted to divide Palestine into two parts, a Jewish state and an Arab state. While Jerusalem would become an international city, the proposal was accepted by Jewish leaders but was rejected by the Arabs and was not implemented. In 1948, the British rulers left the region without resolving the issue. Faiz Ahmad Faiz is the greatest Urdu poet after Ghalib and Iqbal. He was born in the year 1911 before the partition of India in Kala Qadir, Narwal district in a respectable Sialkoti family. With regard to the global recognition of Pakistani literature, Faiz Ahmad Faiz is considered one of the pioneering poets who raised his voice in favor of Palestine after the Balfour Declaration. Objectives. This study aims to discuss the resolution of Israel-Palestine conflict and analysis of the intellectual approach of Faiz. Faiz's ideology for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Faiz Ahmad Faiz is considered one of the pioneering poets who raised his voice in favor of Palestine after Balfour Declaration. He made the issue of Palestine the subject of his poetry. Faiz Ahmad Faiz, including Allama Iqbal, Zafar Ali Khan, Ahmad Nadeem Qasmi, Ahmad Faraz, and Hasrat Muhani, are poets with a passion, with human compassion, who have many facets to their relationship with the Palestinian liberation movement. All of these poets have raised their voices for the rights of Palestinians in their own way and thought, but Faiz has an individual status in this regard. In his poetry, Faiz not only made Palestine a topic of discussion for the sake of his poetic taste, but also expressed his heartfelt sympathy with the Palestinian people. As a Muslim thinker, he thought to avoid chaos and to find effective solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His commitment to Palestine and the Palestinian liberation movement can be gauged from the fact that Yasser Arafat wrote a condolence article after Faiz's death. In it, Yasser Arafat pays his respects as follows: Faiz Ahmad Faiz was my friend and my comrade in the Beirut War. Faz Lost Collection, Dead Heart, Dead Traveler. It is in English, but in Urdu, it may call Mere Dil Mere Musafir. Is attributed to Yasser Arafat. Many of the poems in this collection are for Palestine. The first of these is the poem Palestinian Martyrs Who Come to Work Abroad. In his poem, A Song for the Mujahideen of Palestine, written on June 15, 1983, Faz pays homage to the martyrs who lit the lamp of their blood against the naked aggression and paved the way for the land of Palestine. I want to share a poem. یہ ہے فلسطینی بچے کے لیے فیض نے ایک لوری لکھی ہے. میں چاہتا ہوں اس موقع پہ اسے پڑھوں. بچے کو تسلی دیتا ہے اور ایک ڈھارس بندھاتا ہے, اس کی فیض اور ہمت بندھاتا ہے, اور ایک احساس جو گہری شکل میں موجود ہے فیض کے دل و جاں میں اس کا اظہار اس کے شعروں سے ہے. مت رو بچے رو رو کے ابھی تیری امی کی آنکھ لگی ہے. مت رو بچے کچھ ہی پہلے تیرے ابا نے اپنے غم سے رخصت لی ہے. مت رو بچے تیرا بھائی اپنے خواب کی تتلی پیچھے دور کہیں پردیس گیا ہے. مت رو بچے تیری باجی کا ڈولا پرائے دیس گیا ہے. مت رو بچے تیرے آنگن میں مردہ سورج نہلا کے گئے ہیں, چند نما دفنا کے گئے ہیں. مت رو بچے ابا اماں باجی بھائی چاند اور سورج, تو گر روئے گا تو یہ سب اور بھی تجھ کو رلائیں گے. تو مسکائے گا تو شاید سارے ایک دن بھیس بدل کر تجھ سے کھیلنے لوٹ آئیں گے. فلسطین کے لیے فیض کی ایک اور نظم جو ان کے فکر و خیال کو بڑی طرح واضح کرتی ہے. وہ لکھتے ہیں, میں جہاں پر بھی گیا اے ارض وطن, تیری تذلیل کے داغوں کی جلن دل میں لیے, تیری حرمت کے چراغوں کی لگن دل میں لیے. تیری الفت تیری یادوں کی کسک ساتھ گئی, تیرے نارنج شگوفوں کی مہک ساتھ گئی. سارے اندیکھے رفیقوں کا جلو ساتھ رہا, کتنے ہاتھوں سے ہم آغوش میرا ہاتھ رہا. دور پردیس کی بے مہر گزرگاہوں میں, اجنبی شہر کی بے نام و نشاں راہوں میں, جس زمین پر بھی کھلا میرے لہو کا پرچم, لہلہاتا ہے وہاں ارض فلسطین کا علم. تیرے آدھا مین دشمن, تیرے آدھا نے کیا ایک فلسطین برباد. تیرے آدھا نے کیا ایک فلسطین برباد, میرے زخموں نے کیے کتنے فلسطین آباد. Conclusion. After the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate, the Palestinian territories were divided into Jewish and Palestinian nations by Britain. Faz developed a new thinking for the liberation of the Palestinians, pointed out various proposals for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There is a positive solution to the conflicts, complexities and conflicts between the two communities that can play an important role in today's calm global environment and basic human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much for this very, very important account you have delivered to us. The history of Palestinian-Israel conflict is changing, getting changes every day, and nowadays it is very difficult. Whatever I know, Faz had a very close concern with the Palestinians, and he had a close link with the Yasser Arafat. Is it correct? If I yes, correct. So he has written many things also in poetry and on this liberation of Palestinians. We hope that and pray that Palestinians one day will be independent. Thank you very much for this paper. We are waiting for this your writing in the future. So my next my Presenter is Muhammad Afzal.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Muhammad
I am here, sir.
Afzal.
Can you hear me?
Government College, from Government College University, Faisalabad. And also Nida Tabassum, National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. Their topic is violence of obstacles in Indian held Kashmir, a critical analysis of Aslam's golden legend. Sir, I'm also interested to listen about this minor minority communities in held Kashmir also, because we know India, what is happening there, but this is also a new thing for us. You please.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I hope I am audible to everyone. Let us share my slides first. Hello everyone. I hope I am audible to everyone. My slides are visible, sir? Okay,
Yes,
sir.
It is visible, visible,
Okay,
visible.
sir. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Saab. I am Muhammad Uwais, and my co-presenter is Madam Nida Tabassum. The topic of our presentation is Violence and Subalterns in Indian held Kashmir, a critical analysis of Aslam's The Golden Legend. So let's have the introduction first. Pakistani writings in English had emerged as a distinct genre on literary landscape, especially after the fall of the Twin Towers. Pakistani writers are constantly winning national as well as international prizes for introducing Pakistani culture and sensibilities to the world by rendering their services in two fronts. First is national and the second is international. First of all, national. If we look their services on national level, we come to know that they are highlighting, Pakistani English writers are highlighting some indigenous issues like extremism, corruption, terrorism, marginalization of women, and poor political and social infrastructure. And if we see their services on international level, we come to know that after 9/11, America had produced a discourse which declared that Pakistan is a terrorist country, or Pakistan provides a safe haven to terrorists. These Pakistani writers are, through their writings, trying to dismantle or deconstruct or shatter all those stereotypes, false images, propagandas produced by Western electronic and print media, which declared that Pakistan is a terrorist country. So these writers are writing back and claiming that Pakistan is not a terrorist country. It is America herself who sowed the seeds of terrorism in Pakistan by funding in Afghan jihad against Russia in order to be the superpower of the world. In this way, they are in an attempt to bridge the gap between East and the West. Nadeem Aslam is also one of those big five writers who are also claiming multifarious literary prizes for having truthful affiliations with Pakistani culture. In his latest publication, The Golden Legend, he has attempted to expose the inhuman and barbaric treatment of Kashmiris by Indian army deployed illegally by Indian government to suppress the Kashmiri voices. Aslam's The Golden Legend highlights the marginalization of subaltern Muslims by Indian state in Indian occupied Kashmir. This paper argues that India is utilizing suppressive tools like army, police, and certain goons of BJP, means Bharatiya Janata Party, to maintain its hegemony, justify its unethical subjugation, and legalize its illegal occupation on territory. A French Marxist Althusser's concept of repressive state apparatuses has been helpful to expose this literary text. Indian state, inspired by its exploitive narrative of Hindutva, also misuses religion to gain its ulterior motives and dominates the subaltern others. Hindutva as a meta-narrative is being projected to paint Indian-held Kashmir as solely a Hindu territory where others have no voice. This Anglophone text examines the hegemonic strategies of the West of the state which reside under the canopy of the so-called largest democracy. Literature review. Religion. Religion has been one of the most powerful forces which unites its heterogeneous followers under one roof, but India, inspired by Hindutva, tries to demarcate the people on the basis of religion. Even current Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself is the torch bearer of Hindutva, and he has been engaged in Muslim massacre in Gujarat, Kashmir, and other provinces in India. Hindutva. If we look that word in a dictionary, we come to know that Hindutva is a belief that Indian culture and Indian way of life should be based mainly on just Hindu values. The term Hindutva has been coined by Vinayak Damodar Savarkar in 1923 just to save a collective Hindu identity. But later on, this term was misused to exclude the minorities from mainstream departments and for the genocide of innocent Kashmiri Muslims. Shashi Tharoor, a renowned critic, agrees with me by saying that Hindutva has nothing to do with Hinduism as a faith. It is used as an instrument of political mobilization to achieve some ulterior agendas. Subaltern. Any officer in the British Army who is lower in rank than a captain is called subaltern. But it is Antonio Gramsci, a Marxist critic, who in his marvelous book, The Prison Notebooks, used this term subaltern for the people of the lower rank who are bereft of any social status because of the hegemony of the ruling elites. They do not have any room in society and are socially, economically, politically ostracized for the benefits of the elites. In theory and critical studies, the term is used for the disenfranchised segments of populations, classes, races, cultures, and genders. He was of the view that these sections are deliberately silenced from the history of the nation because history is biased and history is colored with the prejudice and hatred of the lower sections, celebrating the elites' interest. Then we observe a shift in subaltern studies. In India, a group of some historians headed by Ranajit Guha mustered up its courage to dig the history of the deliberately silenced classes, founding a discipline, Subaltern Studies Group, producing 5 volumes for giving the voice to the unheard. Then Gayatri Spivak has also shaken the foundation of the Western Academy with her article, Can the Subaltern Speak? She goes deeper by highlighting the status of female by recording the double marginalization of female status. Subaltern classes are the most marginalized sections of newly born state which get nothing from their ex as well as new masters. Theoretical framework. Althusser, a French Marxist, his idea of RSS, repressive state apparatuses, has been used to unlock the text. According to him, elite class, in order to exercise power to yoke the masses into the repressive shackles, use apparatuses ideological state apparatuses and repressive state apparatuses to inculcate its ideology and to keep shepherds and flocks in discipline. Louis Althusser was a French Marxist who differentiated between these two types of apparatuses for dissemination of ideology by the elites or by the powerful governments to maintain hegemony. Two apparatuses to interpolate ideology are ideological state apparatuses and repressive state apparatuses. Ideological state apparatuses include educational institutions, electronic and print media, and religious platform, etc. Whereas repressive state apparatuses include all the institutions which use force, coercion, and violence like army, police, courts, prisons, and secret agencies, etc. India is using these repressive tools like army, police, state-sponsored terrorist groups to spread terrorism and violating basic human rights in Kashmir. Discussion and analysis. India is fraught with religious extremism, where the two Hindu extremist parties use religion, rather misuse religion to maintain their own monopoly. BJP, RSS. In many instances, we can observe that cow is given more weightage than humans, and certain so-called activists use it as a tool to manipulate minorities. A mob of so-called activists can take the law into their hands and kill anyone without any impunity. In recent times, a mob attacked a police station and killed a Sikh police officer over alleged slaughter of cow. A highly praised Bollywood star, Nasiruddin Shah, whose art is universally acknowledged, has to face severe criticism when he said how the death of cow is more significant than that of a police officer. Because of these remarks, 3 days Ajmer Literary Festival was put off, where he was to deliver the keynote address. He had also planned to launch his book, but withdrew for being at the center of controversy for facing severe criticism. A mob gathered outside the venue and tore, burnt, and threw ink on his posters, which is the evidence of the pathetic situation India is suffering from because of the religious launching. India's violation of United Nations resolution. India is also violating human rights in Kashmir and do not ready to solve the issues according to the United Nations Security Council Resolution 39 passed on January 20, 1948. Rape, torture, sexual abuses, disappearances, killing of innocent Kashmiri civilians are being watched by even the whole world, but world powers are blind enough to see the atrocities inflicted upon innocent people by Indian army. In India, several cases have been recorded where universities where mob has beaten Muslim students. Even a Kashmiri researcher was tortured to death. The Golden Legend. Aslam has basically fictionalized a main character whose name is Imran, through which he has unmasked the sufferings of Kashmiri people due to the barbaric treatment inflicted by Indian army. His father, mother, uncle, and beloved brother, all of them were tortured to death by Indian troops without any reason. He flees to Pakistan to save his life, but finds another world which was totally opposite to his dream. Imran's father. When he was infant, his father was taken away by Indian army for investigation. The army searched for a man named Naeem Ahmad Tirgami, but his father's name was Nadeem Ahmad Tirgami. But even after the clearance, his father did not return and was beaten to death by Indian army. Imran and his brother Lal went to search for the major who had taken their father, mother, as well as uncle. As they passed village by village, hiding into orchards and preventing from the eyes of soldiers, they reached in a village which was under strict curfew because of the massacre of a family of a native beautiful young lady who refused the wish of an Indian commander to marry him. That Indian commander said, if Kashmir broke away from India, every Muslim in India would be butchered by the Hindus as a revenge. Both brothers went to Bakri, hiding, saving their lives, where his brother was unfortunately arrested by Indian army. The officer who arrested him took his brother, tied him up behind the jeep, and drove through the valley from dusk to dawn until just the rope remained. Victimization of women by Indian army. When Imran was in his mother's womb, his father went missing. His mother also tried to search for his husband. She requested about his husband, and Indian troops savagely beaten her up for meddling the affairs. After the 3 days, Imran was born with a broken arm. Imran's right arm was broken due to the savagery inflicted on his mother by Indian troops. These are the clear evidences recorded by Nadeem Aslam in his masterpiece The Golden Legend as to how India is using army, police and other terrorist groups who are engaged in Muslim killings in Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you, OS Afzal Saab. Thank you very much for this study analysis you have from the Aslam Saab work has because India is following the Hindutva narrative. It is correct, and because of this narrative, India claiming to be a largest democracy in world, coming to have a Hindu Raj, where cow is more important than people. And Muslims of Kashmir, they are victimized and being butchered because of this their attitude of India. This is your study have done good. I appreciate that. I acknowledge that. I enlightened. So now our next speaker is Javed Khwaja, Ma'am Javed Khwaja from the University of Punjab. And what is his name? Hafsa Javed Khwaja from the University of Punjab, and she is going to speak on the framing of the national Urdu dailies on Palestine-Israel issue, responsibility and challenges. Welcome, ma'am. You just speak on.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I hope that I am audible to everyone. Is that so? क्या आप सब सुन सकते हैं?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm just trying to share my screen, but still I'm unable to make it. Although my screen share is on. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
Ma'am, abhi nahi, I think sharing well. It is not seen to me.
Should I go for the entire screen or should I go for a window or tab?
Ma'am, try the whole screen.
Ma'am, if so, a screen is not, light is not shown.
Just a moment. Let me see if it works. No,
Slide is not shown.
Slide is not shown yet. Stop sharing from here. Here is my slide, and let me make it a tab if I can. I'm extremely sorry for this thing.
Okay,
I'm not handy to.
Continue.
Can I?
Continue.
All right. Okay, ji, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very good evening to everyone. The topic of my presentation is a framing of national Urdu dailies on Palestine-Israel issue, responsibilities and challenges. Well, I'm not alone here. With me, I have my author, Dr. Aisha Maqsood from Department of Urdu, University of the Punjab, Lahore. We have selected this topic for a reason that, this issue is very much highlighted in the media and all over the world as well. So coming towards, I'm not going to take so much time for sharing the history of the Palestinian-Israel issue. I'm just going to share with you that why we have selected this issue, because first of all, we wanted to see that what is the role of Urdu newspapers in creating awareness or in creating a feel of empathy in the readers from Pakistan, since most of the people, they are reading Urdu newspaper. The readership of Urdu newspaper is more than the English readership. Therefore, we have selected Urdu newspaper. Secondly, we are going to cover that how media is covering this Palestine-Israel issue and the media framing as well. Coming towards the objectives, to examine the reporting and framing of Urdu newspapers regarding Palestine-Israel issue. The first of our objective is that we wanted to see that how the Urdu newspapers are reporting and framing the Palestine-Israel issue. It is because reporting and framing is very much important to see, because when we talk about media, when we talk about the electronic media, when we talk about the newspaper, we came to know that the problem is whenever the media tries to give any slant, whenever media tries to share his own point of view, that makes the perception of the people. But since we are seeing that all the people who are watching and reading the newspaper, what is their perception? That's another topic to do research on. But what we have selected, that was the newspapers, because Urdu newspapers are read thoroughly by the lower middle class, by those people who are not very much active, by those people who are very much not literate. Therefore, we have selected Urdu newspaper. The second objective was to find out that what is the narrative which is built during war against Palestine and Urdu newspaper. So we wanted to see some narrative building. The third one was to analyze the pattern of news reports, editorials with regards to Palestine-Israel issue. So coming towards the research questions, although we have prepared this presentation with much working hard, but still not working, so it's okay. Research questions are: what are the frames being used by Urdu newspaper The Jung on the Palestine-Israel issue? The second one is: what is the pattern of reporting of national Urdu papers? The third one is: what narrative Urdu newspaper is establishing during the selected duration? Coming towards the next, we have selected the duration from 7th of May 2021 to 23rd May 2021. It makes almost 16 to 17 days. That was the time when the issue of Palestine and Israel was at peak, and people were facing in Palestine. And we have seen so much hue and cry and empathy from Pakistan and from all over the world on social media. We know that social media is very much in these days, but we as researchers wanted to know that how newspapers are portraying this inhuman, barbarian thing by Israel. So we have selected Jung newspaper because Jung newspaper, is the most read newspaper, widely read newspaper, and people think that Jung is very neutral newspaper. Even Jung has the policy of saying that we have no policy other than the objectivity. So we have noticed and we have read many news in the Jung newspaper, and if we count the number of newspapers, count the number of news stories that appeared on Jung during this selected duration from 7th May to 23rd May 2021, there were 57 news that were published during these 16 days. So 57 is a good number for 16 days. But let me share with you that whatever Jung newspaper was publishing, whatever Jung newspaper was sharing, whatever it was writing, it was merely a reporting. There was no single investigative report that was written. And this is one of the findings that we were surprised to know, that the people who are going to read Jung newspaper, biggest newspaper of Pakistan, widely read, has not given a single story which was investigative story. Secondly, important finding of this newspaper, well, when it comes to frequency, was that most of the news was about the political statements. There was not news stories published which may be sharing some human aspect, sharing the devastated aspect of Muslim brethren in Palestine, but there was only mere narration of the stories that they have taken from this APP, FP, Reuters, and foreign agencies, news agencies. So the third one finding is that when we were covering and searching for the frequency of news, that how the newspaper has covered, we came to know that most of the news were published by just translating APP, AFP, Reuters, and that's it. The words selection was not very good, and that was not in favor of Palestine. It is for a reason, because they were just translating. Simple translation was being done by the Jung newspaper. So whatever was the slant and framing of the Western news agencies, AFP, Reuters, and AP, so that was just copied and reproduced in Jung newspaper. Coming towards what was there in the editorials and columns, there was a huge problem while we were reading editorials. There was given one space of editorial, two space was given in the editorial, and then there was good editorials as well when there was an attack on media houses, Al Jazeera and CNN and BBC. There was in Palestine that was widely covered. So we had seen there was editorials. A total number of 6 editorials were published only during this 16 days. Well, coming towards the columns that were published by the Jung newspaper, let me share with you some names. If I'm not going in detail about what they have written, but I'm just going to summarize it with sharing with you their frames and their narrative building. So Hamid Mir has written something about Palestinian issue, focusing on the colonialization and what is the role of United Nations organization. Then coming towards Kishwar Nahid, Furqan Hamid has written the role of international Muslim community and especially Turkey. Kishwar Nahid has also focused on something related to how should we see this Palestine-Israel issue, and what are the realities. Dr. Mujahid Ali Mansouri and Mazhar Abbas and Wajahat Ali Khan, they all focused on what are the United Nations organization's resolution and the role of America. So they all have written in wake of this Palestinian-Israel conflict or problem or issue, but with regards to the general context of how foreign policy and international media and international countries are looking at the issue. Imtiaz Alam has written a column, a very well-versed column. Khalil Ahmed and Ansar Abbasi. Dr. Ramesh Kumar has also written. Dr. Ramesh Kumar is one of the very prominent and eminent person in Pakistan. He's a leading politician as well in the minority. He has talked about something related to the humanitarian grounds, about that how the Muslims in Palestine are being dealt. They are looking like a minority, although they were not in minority, but they were now they are. It looks like that they are in minority because they are being tortured and violence is being done with them. So same is the case with Mahmoud Sham and Afzal Rehan, who has they both have written well about the role of OIC, the role of United Nations, the role of Muslim Ummah in resolving the Palestinian-Israel issue. Coming towards that, what type of frames were used in different news stories? I have shared with you the finding that most of the frames that we have seen in the newspaper, Jung newspaper, was about the political statements. Majority, 80%, probably 80 to 85% were political statements about Israel-Palestinian issue. But when it comes to the other frames in different news stories and in editorials and in columns, we have listed down 5 frames that have also been supported by the literature. First one is the human interest frame, in which we have seen that the stories have been written. The columns have been written sharing that it's a humanitarian crisis. We need to look this issue from a humanitarian frame. The people are dying, children are dying, they are not having proper infrastructure, their hospitals are being destructed. And the second one was episodic frame, that whatever is being done on daily basis. So what is the event is being reported. If there is an attack on Iron of Doom, it is being reported just as it is. If there is attack on Al Jazeera, television media house, if the building is demolished, it is reported as it is. So the episodic frame is being used also by the newspaper with regards to the Palestinian issue and its frame. The third one was thematic frame. Thematic frame is basically a frame which shares about different themes and sharing with the whole story. So we have seen in Hamid Mir column, in Imtiaz Alam column, and also in Wajahat Ali Khan, where he has emphasized the role of United Nations with regards to the colonialism of Israel, and also with regards to that how the international community, and specifically America, is again and again using its power to veto different resolutions in United Nations. Coming towards the next one is supporting frame. Pakistani newspaper, Jung, and specifically the writers of columnists have literally supported Palestine, and for writing those, they have urged everyone to think over it, that we have been watching all this barbarianism since our childhood, so we need to work over it. So a supporting frame was also there. Now coming towards important thing, which is missing frame. What is that? There were missing frames as well that should be included in the newspaper so that people could be aware of that. First one was, there was nothing against Israel. There is a difference between if there is something in support of Palestine or against Israel. So we have seen support of Israel, but there was nothing written specifically against Israel or against America, because we know there is a foreign policy. And the next point we noted in missing frame was that most of the news stories lack foreign policy statements by Pakistan. Stories lack history of Palestine, that all we know that it started from 1948. Different presenters, very respected presenters, have been presenting all these things, the whole story of when did it start, and Balfour Declaration, etc. So the history and the colonial occupation was a thing that was missing in that thing. Coming towards the narrative building, what type of narrative was built? Well, at one side we have seen that the newspaper has supported Palestinian issue, but on the second hand we have seen that since they were using and translating different things and different news stories, different information from the foreign funded and foreign news agencies, therefore the words selection, the lexical choices, and the narrative of Western countries, specifically America, was actually copied. I don't know whether it is, we may call it intentional or unintentional, but this is how it is. So in narrative building, if I just list it down, we may call it that we were supporting Palestine, but we were not against the Israel or America. Human rights violation was highlighted, yes, in different news stories and in different columns and editorials. There was a strong urge by the columnists, by the writers of Jung newspaper for shedding light on United Nations organization resolutions and OIC role. And the last one is that, yes, emotional frame was also used for giving awareness to all the readers of Jung newspaper. Coming towards the conclusion, Jung newspaper should play up, I think so. We as researchers, we think that since we have very heartfelt relationship with Palestinian, being Muslims, we have very heartfelt relationship with the Palestine. So Jung did not play up the Palestinian issue and the whole story as he as Jang newspaper should play up or they have given coverage. So they have given news either on international pages or inside pages only when there was escalation, when there was huge bombardment, when we have seen that the social media is filled up with the news stories. At that time, they have given the news story of Masjid al-Aqsa was attacked by Israel, and there was clashes. The word they will use, clashes, jhadpein, in their news story and news headline. Secondly, there was not a single investigative reporting which should be the part of Jang newspaper. We need to read. We need to highlight that there is a difference in English and Urdu newspapers. Method and style of writing, but even then, Jang should have written something related to investigative reporting with regards to Palestinian and Israeli issues, so that people could be aware of that. And last but not the least, we have seen that the newspapers have quoted most of the time, all the international news agencies, which has very badly affected the lexical choices. I don't know why and how they have. How and what sort of the mindset while they were translating. Probably we need to train the writers and the journalists who are working in different newspapers, and this is also the implication and probably the suggestion of this research, that we need to look into that how we are going to report it, and what is the real contribution we are making as journalists, we are making to the society, to the different causes. Since there was no investigative reporting, since there was different frames that was missing, there was not enough space given to this issue, serious concern was raised while we were researching. That's all about from our side. I'm really sorry that I could not show up my very worked hard presentation, but I hope I could be able to make through all these things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. As Palestine is a hot issue, and that is very much concerned with us. And Delhi is just are playing an important role also in Pakistan, but they also understanding much about the issues because the people should have a deep understanding of it. Thank you very much, ma'am. We are waiting for your also paper. We will go through that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for bringing their expertise and experience around the table and engaging in such a fruitful, constructive, and open exchanges dialogue through this session. Special thanks to Professor Dr. Amra Raza, Dean of Faculty of Arts, who put untied efforts for organizing such a wonderful webinar. I'm also thankful to Professor Dr. Salim Mazhar, Vice Chancellor, and finally Professor Dr. Niaz Ahmed Akhtar, Vice Chancellor, because their efforts we are able to have such exchange of views, and this opportunity is fruitful for us, and inshallah we hope that because of their efforts we will continue it and have enlightened to ourselves more and more. Thank you very much.
So with this, come the end of the session. What a wonderful and enlightening experience this has been. Once again, I am thankful to our worthy chair, presenters, and attendees for taking time to engage in this venture. I wish you luck and bid goodbye. You can leave the meeting. Thank you,
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Rahmat Hafiz, can I ask a question from you? Or I can have your number to contact? If you can write, or I can email as well?
Yes, you can note my email address.
All right. Thank you so much, madam.
I'm sharing it in chat box, so you can note it from here.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Rahmat, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Will you provide certificates for attendance certificates and participation certificates?
Ma'am, I will be sharing the details via email soon.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. It was really wonderful.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Same here.
Another query, Ms. Rahmat. I'm sorry to bother you again. Those presenters who have I mean, two authors, like one is a main author and the co-author, I hope they would be receiving 2 certificates or 1 certificate with the 2 names.
Ma'am, I will be sharing all the details after getting message from my head. So I will be sharing the emails through email.
Okay, just a suggestion. I hope to get it in separate form, like 2 authors, then 2 certificates. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.